Welcome to Lesson 4, and in this lesson we deal with if-else statements. So what is an if-else statement? It is evaluating a certain condition in your program, and if the condition is deemed to be true, or you answer yes to that condition, then the statements enclosed in the first set of curly brackets is executed. If the statement is deemed to be false, or you answer no to that question, the statements in the second set of curly brackets is executed. So let's take an example. I have a variable called traffic light, and I've set an initial value of green. If traffic light is equal to red, if you answer true to this question, then execute the statements between these two sets of curly brackets. If you answer false to this question, then execute the statements between these two sets of curly brackets. You have basically two options. You cannot execute both of them. You have to choose between one of them based on whether your condition is true or false. So in this example, because this statement is not true, it's false, because the traffic light's actually green and it's not red, that's why this part will be executed and go will be printed out. Let's change the traffic light to red. And you see now the condition is true and the yes part will be executed, and that's why stop is printed. Now let's have a look at what this if-else statement looks like on a flowchart. Whenever we draw if-else statements on flowcharts, we always use a diamond, and we put in the if statement. It's basically a question. If we answer yes, we go this way and we execute the statements within the first set of curly brackets. If we answer no, we go down this way and we execute the statements within this set of curly brackets. So if we have one if statement, we have two options, either going down this way or we have a second option going down this way. So that's how an if statement looks like on curly brackets, on flowcharts. Let's go back to our code. Let's take another example. Okay, let's change some numbers first. I'm basically going to compare two numbers to check if one number is greater than or equal to another number. Okay, good. So here I have two numbers, num1 and num2, and I've set some initial values, and I'm checking if num1 is greater than or equal to num2. The answer to this question is actually false, so it's going to execute this part here, and that's why it prints out num1 is less than num2. Now let me change the numbers. Let's make num1 300, and you see the answer now to this question is that num1 is greater than or equal to num2. Therefore this part between these two sets of curly brackets will be executed. That's another example of how we could do comparison or use if statements using numbers. Whenever you use if statements, we use equality operators or operations, and there's 6 of them. If you want to compare two numbers to check if they're equal, then you use two equal to signs. Now some students get confused on when do I use two equal to signs and when do I use one equal to sign. So let me try and explain that. You use one equal to sign when you want to assign a value to a variable. Like up here, I have a variable called num1 and I want to assign the value of 300 to num1. That's when you use one equal to sign. When you want to compare two numbers or two variables, then you use two equal to signs. Let's take an example. Suppose I want to check if num1 is equal to num2. Let me change this print line. Okay, good. I want to check if num1 is equal to num2. I put two equal to signs. In this case, they're not equal, so the second set of curly brackets will be executed. The false part will be executed. That's why you see this message, num1 is not equal to num2. Let's make them equal. Let's make num2 equal to num3, so both are 300. Now it satisfies this condition. This condition is now true. The first set of curly brackets is executed, and that's why it prints out num1 is equal to num2. So that was two examples of a single if statement. Now what if you want to use more than one if statements? That means you want more options. You know, one if statement gives you two options. What if you want to have more options? That's when we use what we call nested if statements. Before I get to nested if statements, I just want to complete this swift equality operations. I said to you, if you want to check if two numbers are equal, use two equal to signs. If you want to check that a number is not equal to another number, use these two symbols. You can also check if a number is greater than. You can check if a number is less than. You can also compare if one number is less than or equal to, or one number is greater than or equal to. Okay, so let's get back to nested if statements. A nested if statement is one if statement within another if statement, or more than one if statement, or one if statement embedded into another if statement. That's called nested if statements. Before I show you an example, let me show you on the flowchart again how this will look. If I have my first if statement, I go to the first option. If I answer yes, option number 1. If I answer no, I go to option number 2. Now if I wanted to put in a third option, before I get to this option, I need to add another if statement. So if I answer yes, I will encounter a second if statement. And if I answer yes to that second if statement, I will have another option here. let's call that option number 1. And if I answer no to this second if statement, I will have a third option down here. So 2 if statements gives me 3 options. Option 1, option 2, and option 3. If I wanted to have a 4th option, I will need a 3rd if statement. Okay, so let's temporarily remove this option. And if I answer no down here, I can put in a 3rd if statement. And if I answer yes to that 3rd if statement, I can have another option here. Let's call it option number 2. And if I answer no to that 3rd if statement, I can have another option here. Let's call that option number 4. So you see, the more options you want, the more if statements. And the rule is, if you want 2 options, you have 1 if statement. If you want to have 3 options, you have 2 if statements. If you want to have 4 options, you need to have 3 if statements, and so on and so on. There's a pattern to it. So let's get back to our code, and I'll give you an example of a program that has embedded if statements. In fact, this one has 3 if statements with 4 options. Okay. Before I go through the program, let me tell you what this program actually does. It takes a certain number called num_a, and it checks whether the number is between 0 and 25. That's the first option. It then checks if the number is between 25 and 50. That's the second option. Then it checks whether the number is between 50 and 75. That's the third option. And then finally, the fourth option, it checks if the number is between 75 and 100. So let's have a look at the code. Here I'm defining a variable called num_a and giving it the initial value of 25. Then I'm saying if num_a is greater than 50, if you answer yes to that question, then execute the commands between this curly bracket and this curly bracket. So from here to here, all these statements will be executed if you answer yes to this. Now within this yes part, I've inserted another if statement. This is the nested if statement, the second if statement. If num_a is less than 75, print the number is between 50 and 74. So if this statement is true, then this will be executed between these two curly brackets. If the answer to this question is false, then this statement will be executed. So this is the no part of the second if statement. Now if you answered no to this question, if num_a is greater than or equal to 50, if you answered no to this question, then you will fall through to this part here. So this is the no part of that question. Now within that no part, I've inserted another if statement, a third if statement. And this third if statement says, if num_a is less than or equal to 25, if you answer yes to that, execute these statements between these two curly brackets. And if the answer is false, execute the statements between these two curly brackets. So you see, I have 3 if statements. There's the first one, if here. There's the second one here. And there's the third one here. And I said to you, if you have 3 if statements, you can have 4 options. And where are the 4 options? These are the four options. There's the first option. There's the second option. There's the third option. And there's the fourth option. So thank you very much for watching this lesson. When we get back to the next part of this lesson, I'll show you an easier way to use the switch statement if you have a lot of options, to prevent you from having multiple if statements, which can get time consuming and tedious and prone to errors. I'll show you an easier way to handle multiple options using the switch statement.